Today I want to talk about something a little different. The Final Fantasy VII Remake demo finally came out, and everyone who likes it, and everyone who doesn't like it, doesn't like it. We've been through this before. For the most part, it got great reception though. I enjoyed it, but I'm just waiting for the full game to release at this point. But what I want to talk about today really isn't about the demo, it's about the remake in action RPGs in general. The most common comment I get about the Final Fantasy VII Remake is that it is somehow a rehash of Final Fantasy XV or Kingdom Hearts, or somehow a combination of the two. Now I gotta be honest, I don't see it. It does not surprise me that people use Final Fantasy XV and Kingdom Hearts as a comparison for the Final Fantasy VII Remake. They are two of the most popular action RPGs ever made, and they were both made by Square. However, I just don't get this extreme emphasis that the remake is basically Final Fantasy XV and Kingdom Hearts 3 combined, when I don't see much of either of those games in the demo. But listen, action RPGs are some of the most polarizing games out there, and there's a lot of false information floating around, so maybe what everyone's talking about lies in the details. So let's delve into these three games and see if there's any truth to these claims. Let's start with Final Fantasy XV. Let's start with Kingdom Hearts. Back in 2018 and 2019, I did a 100% marathon of every Kingdom Hearts game ever made, as well as many bonus challenges, and I was slightly involved in the speedrunning scene. But past all that, we only have one question today. How does the combat of Kingdom Hearts relate to the Final Fantasy VII Remake? Well, it doesn't. There are a lot of different combat mechanics in Kingdom Hearts depending on which game you're playing, but overall, none of it feels like the Final Fantasy VII Remake. In fact, I'd be willing to go a step further and say, it is the exact opposite of the remake. You see, with the Final Fantasy VII Remake, Square seems to be trying to make a turn-based RPG that isn't turn-based. What I mean by that is that there really is no dodging damage. You can use dodge roll to get out of certain situations, like big attacks that have giant reeds, but for the most part, you're going to be taking damage constantly. Even blocking just lowers damage, it doesn't negate it completely, and there's no kind of perfect block system, at least not yet. The Final Fantasy VII Remake isn't about dodging damage or hitting the right button at the right time, it's much more of a tactical experience. Your goal in any fight is to use your abilities and spells wisely to maximize your damage and heal when appropriate. There are certain timing issues, like not healing when you're about to get interrupted, but for the most part, you're worried about maximizing your damage and maximizing the stagger bar. You want to use the right abilities at the right time, either to maximize stagger or take advantage of some sort of weakness. Whenever you enter your menu, the game slows down time. It does this because it's not about input. It's not about putting the right inputs into your controller at the exact right time. It's about assessing the situation and knowing which abilities to use depending on what the battlefield looks like. Believe it or not, this takes a lot of inspiration from turn-based RPGs. Like I said, a lot of the mechanics here are from turn-based RPGs, just in an action setting. Because of this, you'll find that positioning really isn't as important in this game as it is in other action RPGs or just action games in general. Sure, Barret needs line of sight in order to deal damage, and some extra damage can be avoided if you're far away from the enemy, but for the most part, positioning really isn't a key factor in winning a battle. Now let's look at Kingdom Hearts. Basically just reverse everything I just said. Kingdom Hearts is all about pressing the right buttons at the right time. Perfect blocks, dodging iframes, all of that good stuff. Kingdom Hearts is what you would call a punishing action RPG, a lot like Dark Souls, although I hate to make that comparison. Have you ever wondered why Dark Souls enemies deal so much damage? It's not just because they wanted the game to be arbitrarily hard, it's because all of the mechanics of the game revolve around you not taking damage. The goal of every boss fight is to learn the attack so that you know exactly when to dodge and when to punish. So if you get hit, you are punished severely for this because you were not supposed to get hit. Enemies in the Final Fantasy VII Remake don't deal extreme amounts of damage unless there's some kind of huge windup that's incredibly obvious. The reason for this is that the general mechanics of the game don't revolve around you not taking damage, they revolve around you dealing a lot of damage. This is why the stagger bar was introduced. Kingdom Hearts, as with Dark Souls, is all about learning your enemy's movements and punishing accordingly. As soon as you start to learn an enemy's habits, the game throws in new enemies with different behaviors that you need to learn and adapt to. Kingdom Hearts is much more of a risk-reward type game. You won't see very many enemies slowly chipping down your health bar. They'll be more of doing giant attacks that deal a lot of damage but are easily dodged. This is also why there's a sound effect every time you're almost dead. The game itself is usually a balance between full health and almost no health. The goal of Kingdom Hearts usually is to weave in and out of enemies, dealing damage and healing yourself or dodging attacks, whereas in the Final Fantasy VII Remake you usually just stand in front of an enemy and attack. In Kingdom Hearts, enemies will sometimes have weaknesses, but a lot of times everything in your arsenal deals about the same amount of damage. Although that's not really including the fact that magic is pretty much broken in every single game, but that's beside the point. The point is, you're not necessarily trying to maximize your damage, you're trying to play perfectly. Deal your combos and get out, deal your combos and get out, or use your combos to stun lock an enemy. Whatever it is, your goal is to not take damage. If you've taken damage, you've done something wrong. So, what exactly is everyone talking about when they say that the Final Fantasy VII Remake is like Kingdom Hearts? I don't know. Personally, I think that everyone saw this and just thought, yeah, it's Kingdom Hearts. Those people probably haven't played a lot of action RPGs and don't realize that plenty of them have command menus. And hey, for what it's worth, I don't blame those people. Action RPGs are very polarizing. A lot of people just simply don't play them and don't have a lot of information about them. The Final Fantasy VII Remake is a much more tactical experience where you need to use your ATB bars wisely or else you might find yourself in a predicament. Kingdom Hearts, on the other hand, you can pretty much spam whatever you want as long as you have the MP to do so. You are never really in danger as long as you never screw up. I will say that when it does come to the command menu, they are pretty similar in the way that they're laid out. But even something as basic as attacking is completely different in Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts is a combo-based, positioning-based combat system. The Final Fantasy VII Remake has nothing like that. You might be able to make the argument that drive forms are kind of similar to the different forms that Cloud has, but even then, Cloud's forms are more of like a risk-reward thing where, yeah, you can deal more damage, but you can't block. Whereas the drive forms with Sora are just a power-up. For the most part, you aren't losing anything by going into a drive form, and you have to earn them, whereas in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, you can just switch whenever you want. I don't know, I'm just not seeing it with Kingdom Hearts. Let's move on to Final Fantasy XV. Now, I'm no expert at Final Fantasy XV battle mechanics like I am with Kingdom Hearts, but casually speaking, it seems like the game has a lot more emphasis on location and environment. There's all these different environmental aspects that change your battles dramatically, whether it be jumping to a tower to get an aerial view, or using magic to actually alter the battlefield itself. Attacks are very much dependent on your location. If you're far away from an enemy, close to an enemy, behind an enemy, or next to an ally, all of your attacks are going to be different. The Final Fantasy VII Remake, on the other hand, just has static attacks. You know exactly what an attack, ability, or spell is going to do, you just need to know what situation to use them in. Just like a turn-based RPG. Final Fantasy XV is also much more fast-paced. It's about knowing what's going on the battlefield and reacting accordingly. The Final Fantasy VII Remake is much slower and emphasizes tactics. Attacking in Final Fantasy XV feels similar to the Final Fantasy VII Remake, but is still a bit different. Holding down the attack button and holding down the dodge button feel a lot different than what the Final Fantasy VII Remake is trying to do. Although to be fair, holding down the attack button in the Final Fantasy VII Remake does give you an attack that hits more enemies, but for the most part you'll be tapping the button. Again, Final Fantasy XV feels a lot more position-based. You want to deal damage and weave out and in as necessary, whereas in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, you really just want to walk up to enemies and do the deed. It just doesn't feel like your goal for a Final Fantasy XV battle is the same as a remake battle. And you can't just point at the fact that the menus look the same or the attacks are similar and just decide they're the same type of combat system. That's not how combat systems work. That's like saying that Mario is the same exact thing as Super Meat Boy because you jump in both of them. And sure, Super Meat Boy jumping and Mario jumping look pretty similar, but the entire point of those two games is platforming, and the way that the platforming is designed is completely different. Now you could say that the end goal of Super Mario and Super Meat Boy are the same, get to the end of the level, and in the same way you could say the Final Fantasy XV and Final Fantasy VII Remake have the same goal, defeat the enemy, but your actual goal in the fight, when you start a fight, the things you're thinking about and the strategies you're using seem to be completely different. Now there are a lot of similarities you can pull between these three games, but in terms of the combat, I have to say, I think they are just completely different. It's fine to have your own opinion about these games and other action RPGs, but I just don't think it's fair to group the Final Fantasy VII Remake into Final Fantasy XV and Kingdom Hearts and say that they're all the same experience. I think Square has put a lot of time and effort into the remake's combat system in order to make it more tactical and more like the old RPGs we know and love, not like the very precise and input-heavy action RPGs of today's age. Now, does this mean that it's better? I will openly admit that there's nothing about the actual combat that really hooks me about the remake. Now, a lot of people are going to like this new tactical style, and a lot of people are going to like the more input-heavy style, but I just don't think it's fair to combine them and say they're all the same. Now, I would say more about my opinions on the subject, but honestly, I want to see the full game first. I think we're missing a lot here. Something like Kingdom Hearts works a lot better in a demo format because you can feel all the little small things going on with the combat system. The blocks, the dodges, the iframes, reading the enemy's attacks, stuff like that. With the remake and how tactical it is, I feel like we're missing a lot by playing it in a demo format. It's all about what you bring into a fight, what spells you have, materia you have, equipment setup you have, and we're missing all of that in the demo. These type of RPGs are much more about the growth of your character, which you just don't get from a demo. So for one, I think we really shouldn't compare the Final Fantasy VII Remake to the other action RPGs that Square has made, and I also think that we should probably wait for the full game to come out before we make an overarching judgment on the actual mechanics of the battle system. But hey, that's just my opinion. Everyone's got opinions. You have an opinion. You should write your opinion down below. Tell me about how Final Fantasy XV is the same exact thing as the remake, because they both have cars in it or something.